Hello and welcome to Module 3, Gathering the Evidence. And what we're going to be doing now is giving you an introduction to the module, an overview, and to introduce some of the basic concepts that we'll be going through together. So the objectives of this particular module are to enable us to identify needs for global and local evidence, and then to be able to find, locate that global and local evidence to support decision making. So the module is going to consist of 3 units. Unit 3A, what is the evidence, where we consider the place of a hierarchy of evidence in informing decision making. Unit 3B is going to look more closely at the sources of evidence, including a discussion of the limitations of evidence as a basis for decision making in healthcare. And we're going to talk about issues relating to public health informatics. And then Unit 3C is where we bring all the elements together, the local evidence, the epidemiological evidence, the systematic review evidence, and we consider a range of different perspectives, whether they be the professional, the public, the patient, the political system, that may influence the implementation of research evidence locally. So what is the role of evidence locally and globally? Well, we're always going to need evidence about local conditions. That's going to inform the decisions about the options that are available to us. But global evidence is the best starting point for judgments about effects, for judgments about the factors that modify those effects, and for insights into how to approach and address problems. And previously in the course we've discussed the important role of global evidence. But local evidence is needed to inform judgments about what decisions and actions to take. In other words, how the global evidence can be applied locally. So the emphasis of the previous evidence course was on global evidence, whereas this course prioritised how you bring together, how you integrate the global and the local evidence. And we can see that illustrated very well in this particular schema. So when we're looking at what works, we want to look at the totality of evidence collected from across the globe without any biases related to geographical regions or language groups. When it comes to what is being tried, then our horizon is somewhat narrower. There will be issues of feasibility, of the local resources and skills. So, for example, we might decide to look at options that have been tried elsewhere within the continent of Africa. But when it comes to the final decision, the implementation on what we need, then we need to bring to bear our knowledge of the local context, the characteristics of the population, their values, their attitudes, the values and attitudes of those delivering healthcare as well. And this is nicely illustrated in this figure that we've amended from an original by Satterfield et al. Here you can see the systematic review evidence or failing systematic review evidence, the best available research evidence from individual studies. We see the part played by epidemiological information, which relates to the demographic characteristics of the population. And then the role of local evidence, informing us as to the needs, values and preferences of our population, and including considerations of the resources we have available, including practitioner expertise. So how does this all fit together? Well, in Unit 3A we'll be looking at what local evidence is needed. In Units 3B and 3C we'll be looking at how such evidence can be found, and this prepares the way for Module 4, which is on how that quality should be assessed under the banner of appraising the evidence. What exactly do we mean by local evidence? Well, local evidence is evidence available from the specific setting or settings in which the policy decision and action will be taken, whether that be a country, a locality, a region, an individual city. Local, therefore, can refer to district, regional or national levels, depending on the policy issue that we're considering. And ideally, we want the data that we have to match the level at which we're making the decision. We have to bear in mind, though, that evidence alone does not make decisions, that expert opinion is more than just evidence. It's a combination of facts, the interpretation of those facts, and the conclusions drawn from those facts. And that evidence will always inform the expert opinion. And so we need to look at whether the facts that we've identified, whether they be from experience or observations from research, that's used appropriately, and that it forms the basis of the opinions and an appraisal of the extent to which the facts support the conclusions. We have to acknowledge too that not all evidence is equally convincing, that how convincing evidence is will depend on how the observations were made and the types of observations that we are including in our evidence. And research evidence is generally more convincing than haphazard observations because of its use of systematic methods to collect and analyse observations. We also have to look at the judgments that are made. These judgments are always made, but they can be made either implicitly or explicitly. And evidence-based public health and management involves making judgments systematically and explicitly. And this has a number of benefits. It can help to prevent errors being made. It can help to resolve areas of disagreement. It makes it easier to see the basis underlying a judgment, so facilitating critical appraisal. And it makes it easier to communicate information to stakeholders. This useful graphic from the Support Tools series, this one, number 11 by Lavis et al., shows that we first of all identify the need for research evidence by clarifying the problem that we're asking. Then we frame the available options to address the problem, looking at the costs and consequences of each option, and these options will differ according to the context in which we're making the decision, and then we use a combination of local knowledge and evidence from research to inform the option that we select and to plan how we're going to implement the option. And the same article by Lavis et al. Helps us to consider how we identify options. The first relates to whether those options are appropriate. The second as to whether they're complete in terms of all the perspectives that need to be brought in. The third relates to the harms from each perspective. The fourth relates to the local costs of each option and whether we have local cost effectiveness information. The fifth relates to any ways in which the option may need to be adapted or modified. And the sixth relates to the identification of stakeholder views and experiences. So these are the references that underpin the module as a whole, and we hope that you find the 3 units useful in the decision-making process.